when we were talking about the polyphenols, how important that is for the whole pain and inflammation picture is just a beautiful, beautiful segue into a food that everybody listening, knows about, but you use it probably all the time in the whole food supplements that you recommend. But I think you're going to get a deeper appreciation, for it today. And that is this beautiful, actually both food and herbal medicine that you see on the left, buckwheat. When we're talking about the whole inflammation picture and all these metabolic issues, there is so much more coming out about the clinical value of this food. It's almost like drinking from a fire hose. And I like contrasting this picture of buckwheat with turmeric, because turmeric is, the inflammation management superstar that everybody knows about. We're going to see in a slide a bit later that, turmeric is the only herb that made the top 10 most popular supplements consumed in the US. So everybody knows about it. The research is just, coming out more and more. But buckwheat has been one of those hidden superstars, that those of you listening that have used whole food supplements, like I said, you've used it for a long time. But now, just in the last few years, we're really starting to get an understanding of how important this is, not just for modulating inflammation, but for immune system support too. So, I really can't add much to the great presentations today about the endocannabinoid system and, the herbal therapies used for supporting a healthy inflammatory response. But what I thought would be nice to wrap this up today is because, everybody's obsessed with the immune system, and we've got a new round of, headline hysteria that people are going to be, even more scared about immune system issues. I thought it'd be nice to start off tying this in, with everything we've heard about the endocannabinoid system, with also simplifying basic immune system support. And so when we're talking about simplifying immune system support, there's so many herbs, so many nutrients to choose from. And, some of them, especially on the herbal side, just like when we were talking about the herbal inflammation support, some of them are not cheap. And, if you use a lot of them, you can use up the patient's budget pretty quickly. And I think what you're really going to appreciate about this simplifying immune system support topic is everything we're going to talk about for the next few minutes for just bolstering, feeding, nourishing your immune system is very inexpensive and simple. And I think you're really going to have more confidence, not just with dietary recommendations, but just the whole food supplements you recommend as well. So number one, the most famous of all immune system nutrients, vitamin C. But I wanted to start with this one because this is where the difference between food and 99.999% of what's out there, as labeled as vitamin C support, is just light years different. If we're talking about vitamin D supplements, most of the supplements out there, are D3, cholecalciferol, and for all intents and purposes, very similar effects in the body. But when you're talking about vitamin C support, this is where food is radically different than taking a high-dose synthetic ascorbic acid supplement. So, one of the things that nutritional pioneers like Dr. Royally realized very early on was that ascorbic acid was just one piece of the entire, what he called vitamin C complex in these fruits and vegetables. And that's why, even though any of these fresh fruits and vegetables wouldn't have a huge amount of ascorbic acid, they would outperform, high doses of ascorbic acid for general health purposes. But one of the biggest clues, it's all about simplicity right now, that you can use to identify a, subclinical vitamin C deficiency, or actually clinical, we could say, is this: just patients with easy bruising, bleeding easily. And this could be, just from simple vitamin C bioflavonoid deficiency, or more likely, on the right in the elderly, medication induced and aggravated. So simple aspirin, that so many people take on a daily basis, and they view it as like a multivitamin, that kind of importance. Aspirin is one of the biggest depleters of vitamin C. And Incidentally, a great website if you haven't used it. There's so many medications that deplete nutrients out there. The website mytavin.com, Tavin. And you can just put in the medications that a patient takes, and the most likely common nutrients that are depleted with that medication will pop up. So just remember that about aspirin and vitamin C depletion. But anybody that gets these bruises, when you see a patient with a big bruise, you have to ask them, do you remember hitting something hard enough to get that bruise? Or do you just wake up with them all the time? And when they say they don't even remember hitting anything that hard and they just have those on a daily basis, think whole food vitamin C support. Now, all fresh fruits and vegetables are going to have, to some degree, whole food vitamin C. But when we're talking about using it in a clinical format, recommending the most bioavailable, effective, multi-purpose delivery foods with the vitamin C complex in its synergist, these are 3 of the foods, and you can see these are not common foods on most people's dinner plates. These are the 3 common denominator foods in all of the vitamin C formulations that nutritional pioneer Royal Lee developed. Whatever formulation he made, you always find adrenal extract, because the adrenals store more vitamin C than any tissue in the body. Buckwheat. So here's our first shout out to buckwheat of this presentation. Buckwheat is going to be found in a lot of whole food vitamin C formulations, because buckwheat is the best food source of rutin that you can find when it's grown, properly. And, what people like Royal Lee understood was that, yes, ascorbic acid was important, but you needed the bioflavonoids like rutin and quercetin, which quercetin is really getting a lot of attention today for immune support, but just for even the easy bruising that we saw in the last slide. This is the type of food that is absolutely critical to strengthen the blood vessels with rutin and all the other immune, and as we're going to see, inflammation modulation effects. The other things, food that is very synergistic to use with whole food vitamin C for immune modulation is mushroom extracts, and especially reishi and shiitake. So those 3 foods, again, they're not common on the American dinner plate, but those 3 in combination, no matter what whole food vitamin C support you want to give somebody, really provide powerful immune, inflammation modulation, and stress support. So the more stress you're under, the more vitamin C you lose. And isn't that ironic with, everybody so scared about their immune system today? The more headlines they read, the more hysteria they're exposed to, the more vitamin C they lose. So vitamin C has always been important, but it's more important than ever before just because of our stress load. And an incredibly synergistic nutrient to use with vitamin C is vitamin A. And you can think of vitamin A as your most important frontline defense immune system nutrient. So your mucous membranes, your eyes, your sinuses, your lungs, the mucous membranes on those tissues, that, when you get exposed to anything, any kind of pathogen, it's the job of those mucous membranes, the strength and integrity of them, and the amount of the immunoglobulin SIGA in those mucous membranes to protect your body. And vitamin A is the most important nutrient to support all of those aspects of mucous membrane health. Now you see the picture of carrots here. And technically carrots have vitamin A, but they don't really have active retinol vitamin A, do they? They have beta carotene. And if you're healthy, if everything's working properly, you can convert that beta carotene into the active retinol, for your immune system, in your eyes, and all those things. But a lot of people have trouble making those conversions. So carrots are great. We saw the importance of carrots for the endocannabinoid system, but where you're really going to get the most guaranteed sources of retinol is from the other foods you see here, like egg yolks, grass-fed butter, and the most powerful vitamin A food that was left off this picture, sadly. Cod liver oil, the original vitamin A supplement, but not just original vitamin A supplement, it's the original vitamin D supplement, which we're going to keep repeating how important for inflammation support, for immune support. And it was the original fish oil supplement. So we've talked a lot about omega-3 fatty acids today, and we're going to do another recap of that. But, we've got to remind our patients that when we recommend a fish oil supplement to them, we're not recommending some new fad supplement. We're trying to get them back to our historical roots. This is what we all used to consume to get our omega-3s, to get that EPA and DHA. And it wasn't just in America. It was in Europe. I was surprised. I had a patient months ago that I was talking about giving cod liver oil to his son for ADD. And he said, oh, yeah, when I grew up in Kenya, we all grew up taking cod liver oil. So even in Africa, this was a worldwide foundational tradition in people's diets. They didn't know about fish oil in the endocannabinoid system. They didn't know about vitamin D importance. They just knew cod liver oil was good for both the immune system. And if you did have aches and pains, joint inflammation, anything like that, that cod liver oil gave relief. So it's, fish oil is not new. We're trying to get people back to doing fish oil. So very important to remind them about the historical place that cod liver oil has. And again, that vitamin A in cod liver oil is your most important frontline defense nutrient. And I always like to use the analogy of, your home. If you're trying to keep invaders out of your home, you've got some things you can do. You can lock your doors. You can shut your windows, and lock your windows, lock your doors. And that's what vitamin A is. Vitamin A is that front line, locking your doors, locking the windows. Now, if an intruder gets past those defenses, if they break through the door, the lock is weak, you've got other measures at your disposal, right? You've got firearms, you got baseball bats, but isn't it easier to just keep that front line defense as strong as you possibly can? And that's what's so simple and beautiful about vitamin A. It's cheap. You can get it primarily in the food. If somebody's eating a lot of grass-fed butter, free, the eggs, the good quality eggs, the pasture eggs, they're going to get a lot of vitamin A just from that, but especially if they're doing whole food supplements like cod liver oil as well. So just to recap, some of you have seen me show this picture of our time machine trip of proving that everybody used to do cod liver oil. This is a cod liver oil delivery truck dropping off a shipment to a local pharmacy. And it's kind of funny, if you look closely at this picture, you'll see not only cod liver oil is featured in here, but if you look at the top of this pharmacist sign, they're also selling Carter's Little Liver Pills, desiccated liver. And we're going to see why that's another critical food we have to re-educate our patients about, especially with immune system health. Here's a teacher lining up her students for cod liver oil. You can see they're all having a great time by their facial expressions. Here's another lineup, mandatory cod liver oil. Yes, that is the same spoon being used for all of them. So again, just remember, this is a foundational superfood, but now we have the science to back up the wisdom of why everybody did cod liver oil. So, everybody's seen graphs like this, and, we've seen other graphs similar to this today, this balance of omega-3 and omega-6. And I thought it was such a great point. Slavko brought up about arachidonic acid. Sometimes it's talked about as this villain, and it's not. It's essential for general health and the endocannabinoid system. It's just our ratio is so incredibly lopsided of omega-6 to omega-3, and that's where the problem is. And that's why when we start looking at this ratio, you're going to see that even though cod liver oil, fish oil supplementation has always been important, it's more important than ever before. And it is one of those supplements that I truly do believe is something every single patient can benefit from. And now that we've got, I don't have a picture of it in the slide, but with the new Omega Quant blood test to actually get a specific number of this omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, if you've got a skeptical patient that says, I really don't think I need a fish oil supplement, I eat fish once a month, whatever they're talking about, that blood test will probably prove otherwise to them. So a healthy ratio of this omega-6 to omega-3 in the blood would, typically be something like 3.5 omega-6 to 1 omega-3. But today's American diet, it can be 20 to 1 omega-6 to omega-3, 30 to 1, 40 to 1. It just depends on how many potato chips and French fries they're eating, right? So these kind of slides that you've seen here, these have been around since, I remember seeing these in the 1990s about, the inflammation breakdown. But I think what's so great about this endocannabinoid system focus today is we can really get a deeper appreciation than ever before for fish oil, because those omega-3 fatty acids are precursors for your body being able to make its own endocannabinoids. So, things like hemp and CBD and cannabis take up so much of the space of the endocannabinoid talk. And, rightfully so, they're all important to talk about. But what we don't talk about nearly enough, and I think this is so important to drive home to our patients, is the most foundational nutrient you can take, and the least expensive, by the way, is a simple fish oil supplement to help your body make its own endocannabinoids, like the anandamide, that Slavko mentioned. So polyunsaturated fatty acids roll in the endocannabinoid system. It's not just one function. They not only help your body make its own endocannabinoids, but remember, they also help with the endocannabinoid receptor activity in the body. So this is a make or break nutrient for the endocannabinoid system. And, it's kind of like the good news and the bad news. The good news is it's simple to support. The bad news is when you look at the American diet, it's no wonder that we all have this endocannabinoid dysfunction. We're not going to go into this, but it's in your notes here. This is a great summary study findings explaining how important these polyunsaturated fatty acids are to being able to make the endocannabinoids and regulate that entire system. And then you see down at the bottom, just this imbalance of omega-6 to omega-3 is a big contribution to all these pro-inflammatory diseases: cardiovascular, diabetes, obesity, depression, Alzheimer's, on and on. And I'm not saying fish oil is the magic answer for all those, but it's the easiest place to start, when we know how critical of a role it is in endocannabinoid support. So again, we've been through this all today, but this is all just a reminder of never discount the importance of fish oil, because every time you give somebody a fish oil supplement and you're supporting that endocannabinoid system, you're supporting relaxation, metabolism, sleep, memory, brain protection, the immune system. We don't think about fish oil as being an immune system supplement, but anything that supports the endocannabinoid system is going to support the immune system. So yes, it's definitely foundational immune support. Appetite, pain, and emotional memory. So the bad news, how much omega-6 we get and the type of omega-6. And again, cannot stress enough, there's nothing wrong with omega-6. In fact, I know a lot of you listening love recommending an omega-6 supplement that works really well for inflammation support. Things like evening primrose oil, black currant seed oil. Those have, omega-6 fats in them, but they're the right kind. They're the kind that actually help promote a healthy inflammation response. The problem is in the US is we're living on the stuff that you see down in the bottom corner, the yellow clear stuff. And soybean oil is the most common source of omega-6 in the Western diet. our consumption of it increased greater than 1,000-fold from 1909 to 1999 in the US. 1,000-fold increase. And this next number, it just kind of boggles the mind. I don't see how it can be true, but it is. Soybean oil now contributes almost 8% of all calories consumed in the US. So, we've got big sugar problems, glucose, insulin issues, but then to literally add fuel to the fire, look how much of this really inflammatory omega-6 oil we're consuming. So just let this slide burn into your memory. Remember this one slide. If you ever doubt the need for everybody to be on a simple, inexpensive fish oil supplement, is just from this one dietary habit of how much omega-6 soybean oil we get. And again, this is the kind of stuff that makes the blood tests like the omega quant for the omega-6 omega-3 ratio so valuable to prove to patients how lopsided this is. So simplified, this is a nice little simplified bow to put on the whole endocannabinoid system talk today. We talked a lot about therapies to support the system, but the most simplified approach to remember, starting place, is when you want to encourage your body to make its own endocannabinoids to support those endocannabinoid receptors properly, fish oil is the best thing that everybody can benefit from. And then when you're talking about the most powerful, effective phytocannabinoid source to help maintain endocannabinoids in the body and to protect prevent their breakdown from those enzymes that break them down too quickly, hemp oil. If you know how to use fish oil, you know how to use hemp oil, then you know how to really support properly the endocannabinoid system. And then talking about the immune endocannabinoid link, this has been mentioned before today, but never forget this. The most famous immune supporting herb on the planet, Echinacea, what's its primary mechanism of action? The endocannabinoid system, supporting the endocannabinoids. It's the alkylamides in Echinacea, that same part that makes your tongue tingle when you taste that Echinacea. That's what really has a powerful effect on the CB2 cannabinoid receptors. But look at this down at the bottom. Those alkylamides also mimic anandamide, that feel good. Remember Slavko talked about the fun endocannabinoid, the feel good anandamide? Echinacea is a powerful tool just for feeling better, just general well-being, because of those alkylamides mimicking the effects of anandamide. So really a great thing to remember about Echinacea. And again, the wisdom of like the Native Americans using this as such a huge part of their medicine system, and the eclectic physicians in the early 19th century, is they didn't know about the endocannabinoid system, but they knew Echinacea was helpful for not just immune system health, but pretty much anything that their patients walked in the door with. So vitamin D, we talked about in the last session for inflammation. But if you could say one positive thing about 2020, it's hard to think of many positive things about 2020, but one positive thing is vitamin D is finally getting the respect it deserves for the immune system, right? A lot of new studies coming out about vitamin D and immune system health, but again, for inflammation modulation too. So the beautiful thing about this nutrient is how inexpensive it is to supplement. Pharmaceutical grade herbal extracts of Echinacea, those aren't cheap to do them right. And some of the other immune supporting herbs that we have, but everybody can afford vitamin D if they're not eating enough foods to get the vitamin D or getting enough sunshine, which going into these months, down here in Florida, we can still get it. But most of you listening, the season we're into, you're going to benefit from vitamin D supplementation. So again, a lot of the interesting thing, the wisdom of nature, is whenever you get a whole food that is a good vitamin D source, it just so happens it's also a good vitamin A source. So whether it's egg yolks, cod liver oil, butter, whole milk, you're always going to find these two immune system nutrients in combination. And that's the one warning, I guess we could say, about, the vitamin D's resurgence in popularity. Everybody loves it now. It's getting more, attention than ever before. But you have a lot of doctors prescribing mass quantities, prescription doses of vitamin D, and they give no thought to vitamin A. Those two vitamins work very synergistically in the body, and you don't find them, as a general rule in nature, separated from each other. So ironically, if you have a patient that's been prescribed or taking massive doses of a vitamin D supplement or medication, it's actually going to increase their need for vitamin A to balance that out and to prevent, a toxic level of it. And that's why the luxury of using foods as your vitamin sources, you don't have to worry about these imbalances. When you give somebody cod liver oil, you get the perfect amounts of vitamin A and vitamin D together. And, we've been talking a little bit about blood, and we're going to merge into a little more about simple blood tests and why it's more important than ever before. That may sound overwhelming to some of you listening if you haven't done blood chemistry in your practice, but it's the best of times to do it, because if you're a chiropractor or acupuncture physician like me, or some modality where insurance isn't going to cover the blood test you recommend, these are the best of times for very inexpensive cash payment blood services. So it's one of my biggest regrets in practice is not utilizing blood chemistry sooner, because there's so much valuable information you can learn from it. And one of the things that you probably already know about vitamin D is, like many other blood tests, the normal range is set a little bit too lenient. So this is a person that you can probably guess is in a lot of pain, a lot of inflammation. You see that C-reactive protein that Dr. Robert talked about in the last presentation, through the roof inflammation. But at first glance, it looks like the vitamin D is normal, right? Because LabCorp didn't flag it as being too low. But the optimal range of vitamin D should be at least like over 50. So it's a big difference between the normal range that the lab sets and the optimal range. But I would encourage you, again, especially in these winter months, and especially when you're looking for the simplest, inexpensive immune barometers for that patient's health, simple, inexpensive vitamin D testing is one of the most accurate ways to tell their susceptibility to catching infection. It's that simple. And this person, they technically pass, but you're going to see lots of patients that their levels are 17, 20, way too low. And again, it's the most inexpensive supplement that you can use for immune system health, along with fish oil. We'll talk a little more about vitamin D. We'll see it pop up on a few ones, but zinc, this is another rampantly deficient or subclinical deficient nutrient that's a make or break immune system foundation and just general health. So I love this picture of zinc because, you got a lot of foods here, but the one that's front and center that gets the prominent spot in this picture that nobody eats anymore, and it used to be our, main food source of zinc in this country, is liver. So liver is a nutritional superstar in a lot of nutrients, B vitamins, zinc, ribonucleic acid, but B vitamins, especially iron. But the zinc factors in liver, this is what has made our dietary shifts in the last century so tragic. Is, at the same time that we were getting rid of liver, we were dramatically increasing our refined sugar consumption. So, when we were getting rid of one of our best zinc food sources, we were really increasing our sugar at the same time. And what does sugar do? It does a lot of nasty things, but it depletes zinc in the body, as well as increasing the inflammation, as we're going to see later. So zinc is another one of those make or break immune system nutrients, very inexpensive to supplement with. And when you're using whole food supplements for zinc, 9 times out of 10, when you look at the label, you're probably going to find liver in there. It seems like the absolute best sources of zinc are the ones that we're never going to eat. Oysters would actually be the best, highest zinc source on this list. And good luck finding many people that are going to do oysters regularly. So just remember, the more sugar somebody does, the more likely it is they're going to benefit from zinc supplementation. And one of the biggest, we talked about the easy bruising tip-off for vitamin C bioflavonoid deficiency. For zinc, it's the white spots on the fingernails. Always remember to look down at the fingernails, and if you see these white spots, you know they have a mineral deficiency, and it's most likely zinc. The other test that you can do that a lot of companies make is a zinc taste test. And it's basically a zinc solution that you can swish around in your mouth. The stronger the taste reaction, probably the better the person's zinc status is. So it should be this strong metallic taste that you just want to instantly spit out. The lower the taste reaction, if it just kind of tastes like water, a very mild taste, then that's a pretty good indicator you really need some zinc supplementation. So you've got a lot of clues of zinc deficiency or need for zinc supplement, but just eating the modern American high processed flour sugar diet in and of itself is an indicator they need some zinc support. Now, this one surprised a lot of people. Everybody knows about vitamin C. Everybody knows about zinc, and more people know about vitamin D for the immune system, but calcium is still the forgotten immune system nutrient, and it's really a critical part of supporting phagocytosis, the white blood cells' immune defense mechanisms. So vitamin C has a lot to do with phagocytosis, but calcium does as well. And the lower your calcium reserves in your blood, the less effectively phagocytosis is going to work, but the more of a fever response you're going to have as well. It's going to be harder to properly get that fever under control. And that's why so many parents have seen amazing results, kids with fevers that just aren't breaking, coming down with simple calcium supplementation like calcium citrate or calcium lactate. Now, when you look at this picture of, calcium foods, you see it's a lot of dairy on here. So you think to yourself, why would anybody need a calcium supplement when we get so much dairy in the US? And, it mostly comes down to pasteurization. Pasteurization is the law of the land with selling dairy in the grocery stores, heating the milk to such high temperatures that the bacteria is destroyed. But there's also calcium cofactors that are destroyed in the pasteurization process. And I was just listening to great webinar from Mark Anderson a few weeks ago, and he talked about the calcium lactate itself in milk is minimized by pasteurization. So calcium is one of those nutrients that nobody should have to supplement because it should be so abundant in our diet. But just like so many other things with our refining modern, food denaturing of these staple foods, we're losing the nutrient content and we're relying more on whole food supplements to fill in the gaps. And, these things are so important to bring up to patients when they complain. Yes, we all have patients that complain about how many pills they have to take, right? Why so many pills? Why do I have to take all these supplements? And the answer is they shouldn't have to most of the time. They shouldn't have to take a calcium supplement or a zinc supplement or even an omega-3. If our diet was right, we were eating enough wild-caught fish and all those things. But we have to explain to them these fundamental changes in the American diet that's sadly necessitated more supplementation than ever before. So don't forget the calcium picture. And a lot of our, most tried and true immune supporting supplements, when you look in the label, you're going to find calcium is pretty high on the list. And this is something that we mentioned Royal Lee before, talking about whole food vitamin C sources, and calcium was something he focused on a lot. He said it was just as important as vitamin C. And now the research, all these years later, finally supporting that. This is just from 2020, molecular mechanisms of calcium signaling during phagocytosis. If you want your white blood cells, those soldiers, to be on their optimal defense alert, they got to have calcium. And then, this is something we wouldn't call an essential nutrient. Everything we've talked about before, yes, you have to have them. They're all make or break nutrients. There's no getting around vitamin C, vitamin A, calcium, zinc, vitamin D. But I just wanted to talk real quickly about, more foundational foods we used to eat for the immune system that are gone. And a big one, it wasn't as commonly consumed as liver, but thymus gland. How many of you listening remember sweetbread, thymus sweetbread? Every time you ate that sweetbread, you were supporting your immune system by eating thymus gland. And most of you use in your practice supplements that have a lot of thymus gland support to support those patients in all of these aspects. The T lymphocytes in the thymus, they undergo that differentiation and mature into their potent killer T cells, all those things that we need on high alert to protect us. And that's why, again, thymus, just simple taking thymus glandular supplements, when you eat that gland, there's unique proteins, microRNA, mineral templates that all support thymus gland function. And how could we talk about foundational foods for the immune system without talking about bone broth? So, chicken soup actually is an immune system superstar if it's cooked with the bone in it. Because when you eat bone broth, you're supporting, and this is what so many people forget, bone broth is really getting a resurgence of popularity for joint issues, collagen, skin health, and that's all great. But what we've got to also tell our patients about with bone, either eating bone or taking bone supplements, is it supports the most fundamental starting place of your immune system. Where do all of your white blood cells come from? Your bone marrow. So when you eat bone and you're supporting that bone marrow, you're supporting activation and proliferation of all of these white blood cells that then can go to the thymus to be matured. So it's a simple food. Again, it's easy, it's inexpensive, but it's a powerful foundational immune supporting food. So this is definitely, when we talk about bone broth, this is definitely one of those take it or eat it foods. Some of you have heard me use that phrase before. There's foods that are so important you either have to eat them, which many of you listening do eat bone broth. That's great. But a lot of patients won't go through the trouble to make bone broth. So they're going to need to take whole food supplements that contain bone extracts to provide that immune system support. Take it or eat it. Bone broth definitely fits in that category. So one more, just kind of quick recap on chronic inflammation today. And like I said, I can't add to anything that was discussed in Dr. Marciano's herbal presentation or Slavko's about the endocannabinoid system in hemp, but I just wanted to really give one more reminder that with all these chronic inflammatory issues that affect so many other things in the body, remember that the biggest one, underlying factor out there that's driving all of this is metabolic syndrome, pre-diabetic issues. So 100 million Americans are either diabetic or pre-diabetic today. And when we talk about the link, between the immune system, inflammation, endocannabinoid system, how they all link together, when we talk about metabolic syndrome, blood sugar, the blood pressure that it increases, what have they isolated as one of the biggest, comorbidity factors with COVID complications? Diabetic issues, pre-diabetic issues, hypertension. So this is the issue, or this is the area that everybody has control over. There's a lot of things we can't control with our stress response, and the environmental toxins were mentioned in the last presentation. But your carbohydrate level, the way you feed your body with carbs and sugar, that's something we all have powerful control over. So when you're talking about inflammation, never discount how much of a root cause this is and how many of your patients have it. So, just quick recap of how do you assess metabolic syndrome, or how do you diagnose it? It's pretty easy to diagnose it. And when you think about this criteria, you realize everybody falls in this criteria, having 3 or more of the following. Belly fat. We talked how belly fat's increasing, and that's metabolic syndrome. Insulin resistance, right? Cholesterol issues, especially triglycerides that are too high and HDL cholesterol that's too low. And we'll see a few quick examples of that being the tip-off, guaranteed early warning signal of metabolic syndrome, inflammation, and yes, weakening the immune system. The third, blood sugar that's over 100. So it may not be diabetic level, but it's like 105, something in that area. That is a criteria for metabolic syndrome diagnosis. And then finally, hypertension, systolic blood pressure above 130. So when you look at that list and you think about an average week in your practice, your adult patients, that's like everybody: belly fat, high triglycerides, borderline high blood sugar, hypertension. That's America. Everybody is walking around with this. So we're going to see, yes, the carbohydrate control is the big thing, but when they have severe metabolic syndrome, you're also going to need whole food and herbal supplements to turn the tide quickly with restoring metabolic health. So simple lab tests for blood sugar, stress, and insulin resistance. And, if I could add one more thing to your plate today, I know everybody's brains are fried after so much good information, but if you're doing blood tests, the most under-tested thing in America today that is a root foundation for inflammation is fasting insulin. All the doctors are checking blood sugar, they're checking cholesterol, which is great for metabolic syndrome. But fasting insulin, which you have in America, are millions of patients, and I'm going to show you an example in a minute, millions of patients with perfect blood sugar, but insulin that's through the roof. And they have just as much inflammation and joint pain in their body as, diabetics. Uric acid is another one we're going to see. It's a big tip-off. So this uric acid I've got highlighted. This is like the hidden metabolic syndrome inflammatory marker. And the reason nobody catches it is, again, the LabCorp range, or all the labs, their ranges are too lenient. The lab will not flag uric acid as being a problem unless it's over 8.2. But in reality, if it's over 6, there's probably inflammation related to fructose sugar overload. So that's a big difference between 6 and 8 on it. So that's worth memorizing today, or just, if you're taking notes, definitely write that down. Uric acid above 6, you're going to have more inflammation in metabolic syndrome. And then the obvious ones you see here: high blood sugar, and then go down to the bottom, high triglycerides. This is the most common blood scenario in America today with American adults: high triglycerides, high blood sugar, high uric acid, and what's not on here that should be on every lab is fasting insulin. Just to show you how much this metabolic syndrome sugar has to do with joint pain, this was a massive gout flare-up. A guy that had gone on a cruise and just binged on sugar for the whole weekend, and he had this huge gout flare-up. And we did a blood test on him the week after, and these were his triglycerides. You don't have to be a blood chem expert to know that when you see a lab result come back literally in the color red alert, that it's a big problem. So it was all about his sugar. And then look how low the HDL is with him. It's simple. There's things about blood tests that are really complex, and some of the blood tests on the last presentation I wasn't familiar with, and seemed complicated, overwhelming to me. But this one is so easy to memorize right now. High triglycerides, low HDL cholesterol is the most common metabolic syndrome inflammatory marker that you're going to see in the average American. And it's so inexpensive to test for. The company I work with, I can order a whole lipid panel with all this for $15. So it's the best of times for really inexpensive blood testing. This is the average diabetic today that's got lots of blood sugar and lots of insulin. But, you know, this is the classic insulin resistance diabetic. But I want to really highlight on this next slide, you know, this is a 45-year-old. He really, you know, he had some belly fat, but it wasn't really pronounced. But if you look at his blood sugar, it's borderline high, but most doctors would just say, you don't have a blood sugar problem. Everything looks great. Everything's good. But go down to his fasting insulin. His fasting insulin is, by normal ranges, double what it should be. But in reality, it's about 5 to 7 times what it should be. So he was loaded with knee pain, shoulder pain, low back pain, and it was all from insulin resistance driving inflammation. And that's why you see the C-reactive protein high too. So I hope this one slide here, if you do blood testing or if you're telling your patients what blood test they should order from their doctor, make sure fasting insulin is on it because it's such a big piece of the inflammation pattern. We basically put this guy on fish oil, turmeric, bioavailable turmeric, which we'll do a recap of real quickly, and buckwheat. He cut the carbs down and completely out of pain just with those simple strategies. So from a dietary standpoint, it really is this simple. With chronic inflammation and with immune system support, remember, they're not separate entities. The same dietary choices you make for getting inflammation under control are the same choices that are going to boost your immune system and decrease your risk for immune complications with a lot of pretty nasty viruses going around out there right now. But on the supplement side, I promised I would give a special shout out to buckwheat. With that backdrop of insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, diabetes, the epidemic, and, you know, I know this may be a controversial statement to make, but I always say that diabetes and metabolic syndrome is the real foundational pandemic in the US that's driving so much of everything else. With those millions of numbers of people in that metabolic syndrome category, I truly believe buckwheat is one of the most foundational foods. And, you know, we've used it, it's been used for, you know, hundreds, thousands of years for health in Russia and Asia for multitudes of purposes. But in our modern diet, with this, you know, blood sugar epidemic, buckwheat is more important than ever before. In fact, that's a theme we could apply to all of these foundational foods. Fish oil is more important than ever before in history. Buckwheat is more important, and we'll definitely see turmeric is more important than ever before. But when you look at the benefits of buckwheat, we already talked about the vitamin C synergy for immune system support. There's lysine in buckwheat that supports immune system health. But on a nutrient standpoint, what we forget about a lot, and it's kind of a newer discovery, is buckwheat leaf is one of the best bioavailable sources of both magnesium and potassium. These are two nutrients that are depleted rapidly with sugar and carbohydrate consumption. So when you eat buckwheat, or, you know, realistically taking a buckwheat supplement, you're replacing some of the key nutrients that sugar depletes. Other nutrients you see at the bottom, there's some zinc in buckwheat. B vitamins are rapidly depleted with sugar consumption. So the first thing you want to remember about buckwheat is it just repays the debts that eating too much sugar creates. Magnesium deficiencies, potassium. Buckwheat is replenishing those nutrients. But even more powerfully, and that's what I so appreciate about the end of Dr. Roberts' presentation, is he talked about how powerful polyphenols are for promoting a healthy inflammation response. And in my mind, buckwheat is the king of polyphenol foods. Simple, inexpensive, so powerful. And the most famous, or, you know, what it's highest polyphenol content is rutin. There's nothing better out there with rutin content for polyphenol promoting a healthy inflammation response than buckwheat. But look at the carotenoids in buckwheat, beta carotene. So there's its immune system benefits. But then purple stuff, anthocyanidins. This is in the stems of buckwheat, you get a lot of the benefits of blueberries and bilberries, those purple compounds for the eyes, for the vascular system. And that's what, again, when somebody's got metabolic syndrome, diabetes, what system takes the biggest hit in their body? Their cardiovascular system. You know, they get the vascular damage, the plaque. So these things like rutin and these anthocyanidins are beautiful protective phytochemicals to protect the blood vessels when somebody's diet isn't perfect and they're in that metabolic syndrome phase. Chlorophyll, we know how good that is for inflammation support. Carotenoids for the eyes, lutein and zeaxanthin. So I truly believe it's the most underrated, underused, buckwheat is the most underrated, underused clinical tool that is out there. You know, there's just so few people that are using it in their practice, but it's so multi-purpose and it's so inexpensive. So you're probably already using it, but I hope that is another reminder that now more than ever, with immune concerns being higher than ever before, and with blood sugar concerns being higher than ever before, this is a food that's time has come for really everybody to be on. And, you know, these are just some of the recent studies backing that up. And surprise, surprise, rutin and curcumin from turmeric are very synergistic. And then down at the bottom, you see mechanisms of anti-diabetic effects of rutin, which there's nothing better with buckwheat to provide rutin. And if you haven't read the Holistic Matters article on buckwheat, I highly encourage you to do it because it'll just give you a better appreciation of how multi-purpose this food is than anything out there. The article is called Buckwheat, a Super Pseudo Grain. And then just one more shout out to the most famous, you know, we mentioned buckwheat is the most unknown, underused tool for inflammation and immune support. But just one more quick word about turmeric. It's been brought up a lot today, but we haven't gotten too deep into the bioavailability issues of it. And, you know, we think about it as just for joint health because that's what it's so famous for that joint inflammation effect that everybody loves and how quickly that can occur in a lot of people. But again, with our diabetic and metabolic syndrome overload crisis, turmeric is an essential tool, the curcumin from it, for mitigating the damage of having metabolic syndrome and diabetes, as you can see from these studies. And the nice thing about turmeric, unlike buckwheat, everybody knows about it. Everybody knows they should be taking it. They just need guidance of, you know, a good quality extract. So, you know, it's kind of the good news and the bad news. On this last slide, we see it's the 5th most popular supplement in the US. And you see vitamin D, fish oil are up there too. That's all great news. The bad news is the quality concerns. You know, there's some big quality issues with turmeric out there. And look at the bottom one. Consumer Lab did this quality test on turmeric supplements, and they found 3 turmeric supplements exceeded the limits applied for Consumer Lab for filth due to elevated numbers of insect fragments found in the samples. So there were such high levels of insect fragments in these turmeric supplements, it didn't pass their quality control. So again, we have to show people good quality turmeric extracts. And besides the quality issue, you know, what everybody listening is aware of, and most of your patients are actually aware of, is the bioavailability issue. I see a link to the buckwheat article has just been put in your chat box, so make sure you click on that to read later. But you already know that even if you get the best quality turmeric, it's not absorbed very well. And even if it's absorbed well, and this is the biggest thing to remember, if you can put one more fact in your brain tonight, it's that even if you take turmeric with something like black pepper or other bioavailability enhancers, it still has to go through the liver. And when it goes through the liver conjugates those curcuminoids, processes them to make them less effective. It doesn't mean they're not effective, but they become less effective. So we need bioavailable curcumin that's not just going to be absorbed better, because there's a million things out there that can do that, like black pepper, which most of your patients are probably familiar with. We need something that's going to protect those free curcuminoids as they pass through the liver from becoming weakened. And, this was just a study that showed that even if curcumin's absorbed better, this curcuminoid was absorbed 27 to 31 times better than just eating turmeric. But when they measured the blood, all they could find was the less effective conjugated curcuminoids. So as it stands right now, and this could change, next year, somebody in a lab may discover a bioavailability enhancer that's even better than fenugreek for getting turmeric curcuminoids to the sites of inflammation. But as it stands right now, this is the most bioavailable delivery method to supply curcuminoids for your patients with inflammation, with metabolic syndrome, with immune system concerns, all of these things that are all wrapped up together. When you infuse turmeric into fenugreek seed, that creates what's called curcumin-galactomannocytes, or CGM. So CGM is absorbed 24.8 times better than just eating turmeric. But that's really not a big deal because, again, there's a million turmeric supplements out there that get absorbed better. I put the most important part in bold print. When you infuse turmeric into fenugreek, not only is it absorbed better, but when you measure the blood, you're going to find 74% of those curcuminoids in the bloodstream are free curcuminoids. Those are the potent inflammation modulating curcuminoids that really have the best effect in the body. So this study, they couldn't find any free curcuminoids. When turmeric was infused into fenugreek, 74% was free, potent, active curcuminoids. And this is what has made CGM such a popular supplement. Is it's not just that, people know about it, it's that they feel the effects so quickly when you get that kind of percentage of free curcuminoids. So again, don't think of it, turmeric, as just for joint inflammation, musculoskeletal health. Remember, most of your patients have some degree of metabolic syndrome in the background, and that automatically necessitates them needing more turmeric in their life, and especially this type of bioavailable curcumin. What I love the most about bioavailable curcumin, and the CGM especially, is how well it gets into the brain. So, when you've got inflammation and when you've got metabolic syndrome, your brain takes a big, big hit with that. So we want as many things to protect the brain, especially until people can get all their inflammation and metabolic syndrome issues under control, because that's going to take time with diet and, the detox programs, that were mentioned in the last presentation. So when you got somebody that, needs fast brain protection support, again, don't limit yourself to thinking of turmeric as just joint inflammation. It is the most powerful thing when you get it across the blood-brain barrier to protect the brain cells. So CGM in brain, this was with rats. They gave rats turmeric, and after 2 hours, they measured how much curcumin was absorbed into the brain. So it was 1.4 nanograms per gram in regular turmeric. With turmeric infused into fenugreek, it was 343 nanograms per gram. So to put it another way, that bioavailable curcumin delivered 245 times more free curcuminoids into the brain than just eating turmeric. That's a big, big deal. And, with all these endocannabinoid dysfunctions, all these inflammation issues, all these metabolic syndrome issues, we mentioned buckwheat's more important than ever before. Fish oil is more important than ever before. But remember turmeric. I give bioavailable turmeric, fish oil, and a buckwheat extract literally to every single one of my patients. Those are my 3 absolutes for every single patient, because everybody has some degree of inflammation. Most people have some degree of metabolic syndrome, and endocannabinoid dysregulation. So it's the perfect 3 foods for every single patient to benefit from. So advantages of bioavailable curcumin. Actually, you know what? We could actually say advantages of using all 3 of those superfoods we just talked about, because it applies to all 3 of them: fish oil, buckwheat, and bioavailable curcumin. All 3 of those are very multi-purpose: cardiovascular, brain, inflammation, at a very low cost. All 3 of those foods have a huge amount of supporting research. There's over 14,000 studies on turmeric, over 30,000 studies on fish oil. You're never at a shortage with that. All 3 of those foods are very cost effective. So some of the herbs we've talked about today, the willow bark, that we talked about for inflammation, if you get good quality willow bark, that is definitely not cheap stuff. But all 3 of these, very inexpensive monthly cost. Low dose, you don't have to use a lot. If you use a concentrated fish oil, it's 2 to 4 pearls. Bioavailable curcumin, 2 to 4 tablets. Very, very easy. And then finally, the reason those are my 3 foundational supplements is they're synergistic with every other supplement we talked about today. The Echinacea, the hemp oil, all of those things I believe are going to work better with those 3 foundations to modulate inflammation in the metabolic response. So, we've got so many things to choose from for the immune system and inflammation, but I really hope that's helped simplify some of it for you. If you just kind of start with those basic core foundations and have confidence in them, everything else will build on that. So with that, I just wanted to thank Standard Process, Sarah, and everybody else who got this together. And thank you so much for everybody who, I see we still have 200 people on that really invested so much of your time today. And I really hope you got clinically relevant information to take back and help your patients. What we do is more needed, more important than ever before, and you can have confidence in your tools. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Sarah.